Welcome to Setting the Table, hosted by Robin B., where we bring you the insider's scoop from top restaurateurs, industry experts, and creative minds who know what it takes to stand out and succeed. Hungry for insights on how to fuel your growth and stay ahead of the curve? You've just found your secret ingredient.
Robin Beatty here. Welcome to our podcast. Today, I'm excited to interview Mike Wilson. He's a Cyprus-based videographer and president of Crusader Media. He spent 8 years creating really compelling video and content for industries such as hospitality, real estate, commercial advertising, even music videos. I think he just finished his second movie, so cinema. So he's got an incredible amount of experience, and he's really excellent at crafting videos that tell a great story, particularly for restaurants, helping them to stand apart from other restaurants in competition and really sort of shine through what separates them. So his expertise is essential in just highlighting dishes, highlighting the restaurant ambiance, highlighting what makes them different. So he kind of hits all of it, and he's just got an incredibly robust toolkit of advanced skills that really make him an expert videographer, not only in just videoing, but also in editing. So with that, I am going to talk to Mike today about specifically hospitality and how he approaches videography to showcase food and to help tell restaurants' brand story, with the whole purpose of elevating them and really engaging with potential customers. So with that, welcome, Mike.
Hey, Robin, it's great to see you.
Great to see you too. So before we get started, I'm going to ask you some questions. I do want you to have an opportunity to just give everybody sort of a background of how you got started, some of your experience, what you like to do, and, specifically if you can talk about restaurants experience and kind of, just give a background of what you do.
Okay. Well, how I got into this was, it's kind of a circuitous route, but I spent 26 years in construction project management and always wanted to do something different. Growing up, I was an avid reader and I loved great stories. I really loved C.S. Lewis. I loved Tolkien. I loved the stories that they told, and they created these whole worlds that were amazing. And then I fell in love with movies. Spielberg and George Lucas, and then the music of people like John Williams, who wrote these scores that were just, you can always just hear them. Indiana Jones, the score right off the bat, or Star Wars, and so I actually started in studying music, and I spent over 20 years studying music theory and wanted to write scores. But I always had a camera in my hand too. So I took lots of pictures with the family and made videos as soon as video cameras came out. It was a passion. I just loved doing it. And I started making goofy videos with the family, and from there when I moved back here to Texas in 2008, I joined a local church and became a part of their media team. And it was a big church, so they had a lot of resources. And our main studio, the main room that we would work in, it had a wall 20 feet long with massive monitors, and we've got sliders and faders and all these things. And it was just so impressive. I felt like I was in NASA. And then we're working with these big, massive cameras, and we got to bring in really great, artists, Christian artists, that we made recordings of, and I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much that I decided in 2015 that I wanted to do this full time, and I was in a position where I could do it. And so I left construction, and it was kind of a tough time at that time for the construction industry, but for me it was a great time because I was in a financial position to be able to step away from that, and I've never looked back. And
That's awesome.
yeah. So, and I love it. I love what I'm doing.
And so, can you kind of hit or talk about some of the experiences you've had to date? So when you did make that transition, what you worked on, and kind of how you've grown over the years? Because I know you you've taken on some good, really big projects as of late too. So would love to hear a little bit more about that too.
Well, I was fortunate enough to be connected with some people through my church and just serving there that they had opened up some doors for me. And I ended up working in a lot of drone work at first, doing camera work for a company that was actually building drones, and I was doing real estate photography and headshots for people, and again, still working on learning video. In fact, I watched YouTube like I was a junkie on YouTube, and so I was watching all these tutorials, and I learned quite a bit, and I just would practice all the time, and I gathered friends around me that had similar interests, and we made short stories, short films, and doing those things. But basically, it started with drones, and then went to bigger and bigger cameras, and the projects went from small projects to then working on larger commercial projects, getting teamed up and partnered with other bigger marketing companies to make television commercials. And then got to meet wonderful people like you, Robin, and
Thanks.
do
Thanks,
work.
Mike.
We've done some projects, and so it's just been, it's been incredible because I've gotten involved in two feature-length films now. I've worked on, I don't know how many commercials for different industries, even including manufacturing, which has been fun too, and construction.
Yeah, it's awesome. I
Okay.
just want people to, kind of hear about the type of experiences you have with videography. It's extensive.
I've been exposed to not just doing camera work, but of course doing audio work as well, writing, obviously doing a ton of editing.
So awesome background. Clearly, you have a ton of experience in a multitude of industries. Can you discuss the role of videography in restaurants, specifically in hospitality, and maybe how you leverage or what you do to make sure that the videos really capture the essence of the brand, their story, and then, make it highly compelling to their potential customers or existing customers?
Yeah. So food is something that everybody loves. It's kind of an easy sell in a way. But everybody has their own tastes. And one of the cool things is being able to, since for me, I particularly love Tex-Mex, and I love seafood, and yeah, so I go in and my goal is to help really just kind of show off what they've created. They're not just cooking you food. It's a creation. They're creating something that is of incredible value. People want to come in and have an experience. Our goal, when we come into a place to help promote a restaurant, is not only to show off their food, but we want to show off the atmosphere. What's their dining experience like, and how invested are the people that are working there? How invested are they in the process, and making sure that when you come in there, you get that great experience. And so as a videographer, it helps me to understand, number one, who they are. If I get a chance to talk with the owner, it's always good to interview the owner. That way you can find out what's been their mission, what drove them to do this. I mean, maybe this is something that was done, their family did it before, and they want to continue in that tradition. And so it's important to be able to tell their story. And then you want to, obviously, I mean, our goal is to show off their food, show off that atmosphere, the ambiance, and that experience.
Yeah, for sure. I've always been a big proponent to getting professional videography and photography done, as well as, just because of the heavy, steady content need of restaurants, particularly for social and those organic channels, to also be taking their own videos, right? Your cell phone takes good video. There's just techniques and stuff that you need to be doing with lighting, with a setting or a staging the actual atmosphere for the shot. So when you take pictures of food, like, what kind of things are you looking for? And also, like, maybe that can also translate to what people, if they're doing it on their own, would also need to look for. as far as lighting, maybe, the staging, maybe movements or transitions. Do you have any thoughts on that?
There's two different worlds. I mean, I've done social media where I've even used my own phone, and that's somewhat limiting in a sense that because there's only so many things you can do with that. Whereas with the camera, I can do a lot more with it. But for someone that is using their mobile phone, I would definitely recommend plan your shoots, think ahead. You clearly want to be prepared and not just start shooting. I would definitely do that.
So what about lighting? Food is a little bit unique to other things. You don't want a big bright light on food just
Right.
because it quite often drowns the color. It doesn't make it look super appealing. So any thoughts on lighting?
Well, in terms of lighting, I typically recommend for any kind of food, you want as diffused a light as possible. You don't really want the harsh glares, but you do want to make it pop. So sometimes I'll set up a light that's somewhat above, maybe at an angle, 45-degree angle towards the food. And then I'll have another light that will be moving and that will create motion. One of the best things that I recommend in food videography is motion. And a static image is good, but video, we have the option to be able to take advantage of motion. And if you're able to do that and get good, smooth movement, then you're going to have a much better experience in terms of, as a viewer, going to enjoy what they see. So my recommendations are light it properly, meaning you're going to adjust the angles of your lighting so that it doesn't create too much glare or distraction, but you want it to pop. You also have to think about, you want proper contrast. And what I mean by that is the difference between the darks and the lights. You don't want a white tablecloth and white plates and then you're serving white pasta, because then everything kind of just blends together. So you want to create contrast. So you're thinking about your composition. If you're serving something on white plates, get a black tablecloth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Tablecloth service or something darker,
yeah,
brown.
something that's going to
Wool.
create that contrast. And if you're shooting down low and you're shooting across the food, make sure your background's not a simple white wall. Make it, more interesting. Create depth by shooting across the restaurant space, and make sure that your lighting is brighter than the lighting of what you're shooting. Now, when you're shooting in the kitchen, you don't have, especially if it's during working hours, you don't have the luxury of setting up lights. You're running gun, you're shooting it as it is, as it's happening. And my recommendation is shoot tighter, and those shots look a lot more beautiful. But I also recommend shoot 60 frames a second so that you can slow it down in post and make it very buttery. Because if you do it that way, you can actually handhold your camera. You don't need a fancy gimbal. You can handhold the camera, and with just a little bit of motion, when you slow it down, it becomes very smooth.
A picture is worth 1,000 words. I think videography is worth 1,000,000, right? So, but it's also more complex. There is more to think about to really capture just stunning imagery and videography. So there is a lot of that, but there is a social component that does allow restaurateurs to take the ball and run with it, and to be able to capture ongoing content that's just regular. And the expectation on social isn't as high as it would be with a professional videographer. I think most people who are on social, they recognize like it's social. They expect it to not to be perfect.
Correct.
But I do think those tools are still valuable. So like what I tend to tell restaurateurs is make sure you have a tripod, just basic tools. Make sure you have a good iPhone or a phone that has a good videography or video component to it, right? It shouldn't be 20 years old.
Yeah.
If you have, video equipment, you can certainly try to leverage that. I do find the cell phone for restaurants actually makes it more likely they'll take video because it's right there in their pocket.
Correct.
Whereas if I have to go get a video and make a big production of it, a lot of times the video just won't happen.
Yeah.
And then the gimbal, I think that is, if you're trying to level up what you're doing for social on your own, a gimbal is great.
I would definitely recommend a gimbal, especially if you're on a phone, because it's the only way you're going to get smooth sweeping motion. If you want to be able to kind of push forward and in, or pan across, that gimbal is invaluable. And they make gimbals for iPhones, and they're not expensive. Under $200, you can buy yourself the most incredible gimbal for a phone. And so I definitely recommend that. I use it. I don't rely on a gimbal all the time, but I do use it often because it's an amazing tool. In terms of lighting, I would get lighting that is called bicolor. And it doesn't have to be a crazy expensive light, but you want a light that you can diffuse, meaning you put some kind of a modifier on it, like a dome that has white diffusion on it, so that you can then spread that light out more evenly. You don't want the light concentrated like a flashlight. It'll just make it look terrible.
When we talked about photography, we talked about using a lot of natural light. I do think video can benefit a lot from natural light, but it is for that very same reason. It's sort of diffused and there's sort of an even lighting across the board. Whereas if I've seen lots of videos and pictures where people take them and they go to a window and they put the food at a table right in direct light and it looks terrible. You've got a heavy shadow, the food looks washed out. And so that's just kind of a big no-no to watch out for, both in videography and photography, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I would recommend a bicolored light. That means you can adjust the temperature of the light, because to give you an example, I'm in a room that's got warm light. It's tungsten, like the old school, light bulbs. You go into a restaurant, you've got a combination of warm lighting in the, and usually in the dining area is a warm light, but then you go into the kitchen area and it's a cool light. It's more like the fluorescent tubes. And so you want your lighting to match the room. And so that's why you would need a bicolor light. The other thing I would recommend is some kind of an audio capture device, some kind of microphone that you can record into and capture some of the sounds. Go capture the sizzling of steak cooking on a pan, or dropping, fries into the fryer, or whatever it is, chopping a vegetable or whatever, just stuff like that. That adds dynamics to the video, and audio is 50% of the experience.
And I love when there's an overlay of sizzling or some kind of thing of people chopping on a video. If you go and you look on social at videos that tend to get a lot of likes, they have those little elements that set them apart and do elevate the videos a bit. How hard is it to, because the next part of this, there's the filming piece, right? And then there's the editing piece. And that's where, if you take audio, you have to be able to edit it in. Some of those things might be more sophisticated than most restaurateurs will be able to do in like their own thing. But maybe can you talk about some of the editing techniques that you've found that you do professionally? And then, we can hit like what maybe a restaurateur can do on their own versus what really they do need to hire someone to create.
Yeah. So most clients don't want to do their shooting at outside of normal business hours, which creates kind of a challenge. End result is you kind of have to run and gun it, because you have to work within their schedule throughout the day, and you end up getting way more footage than you ever need. So the edit becomes a real challenge.
The more video you take that is not sort of laid out in the script, and this kind of goes back to maybe reemphasizing, map out what your content video should be ahead of time, because it just helps in the back end on the editing.
Yeah. So in terms of editing, I mean, it's one of the things that you're going to spend a lot of time in if you haven't properly prepared ahead of time. So if you plan your shots, and you shoot accordingly and you repeat those takes, then you can go and pick your best take very quickly, and then finish your edit. It doesn't take long because you have a plan that's been mapped out. You've got 10, you're doing 10 shots because you've got 15 seconds. Okay. Most of the time, a lot of these advertisements are 15 seconds long. And so you're only going to get like 10 clips. But often what will happen is in a run and gun situation, we've got 300 clips. And so we've got to narrow down from 300 clips, and we're talking 90 minutes of footage down to 15 seconds. And so a lot, that's where the lion's share of time is spent in the edit, where you have to scrub through the footage and then determine what are the best elements that meet the treatment, which is what the customer really wants you to do. Like, they've given you, this is your marching orders. I want to highlight steaks. Okay. And we make the best steaks. So you're going to highlight that. But while we're there, we're shooting everything else too. I will say this, the edit is the longest part. If you spent 2 hours shooting, you're going to spend 8 to 12 hours editing to do it right.
And this is, and when you're talking about editing, I mean, when we talk about that kind of time frame, we're talking about really good professionally edited videos, like what Mike does. Now, for the restaurateur who's trying to do it on their own, keep in mind, I think a lot of people, this is where the pitfall does come, is they assume like, well, I'm not a professional, I'm going to shoot a video and it's not going to take me that long. It's still going to take you some time. It is very rare that you're going to be able to do a single video take and get what you want. That's highly compelling. You can certainly get clips and you can use those on social, but it's not, there's a difference between a short organic clip in like a little bit longer 15-second spot that highlights multiple elements of a brand story. And that those two things are kind of different. And one can require very minimal editing. One's going to require a lot more. And this is where it gets challenging of whether you can do it on your own or if you need to hire someone like Mike who does that professionally and care that.
Correct. Yeah. And if I were to make a recommendation to restaurant owners, my recommendation is to film outside of normal business hours. And the reason I say that is you can pick your best people. You can light everything properly. You shoot each item that you want shot one time, and you do multiple takes so you get the right take. But then everything is perfect.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice. And I think the one caveat of that might be just when you're hitting ambiance, showing your restaurant full and people really loving your food. That would be the one time. Catch those during regular business hours. But I love the idea or the advice to do it off, because I do think it reduces the distraction and it allows you to really focus on getting the shots you need to get a really compelling piece and the really compelling video that's necessary to do so.
I actually have an idea for that. I was thinking about this, and it's simply this: you create an evening event where, and the reason I recommend this is because you can't just shoot when the restaurant's busy because you can't film people in the restaurant without getting everyone to sign a waiver.
Yeah.
But if you have an event in your restaurant, you open it up for extra hours, and people come in and they're still buying your food, but they're going to be extras in a commercial. And so, they're buying your food, you're still serving customers, but this is designed to be the opportunity to stage all the shots that you want to get, and you can turn it into a fun experience for your customers that are your biggest fans.
I think we've done this in the past with some events where we've used that video at some of the restaurants we've worked on. But yes, I think that's actually excellent advice for when you're ready to shoot. Maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's monthly, but you take that time to maybe invite your core loyalists. And it also is a opportunity for you to give them something special and make them feel VIP, which then accomplishes another goal that restaurateurs should be focused on, and making people become your advocates, really become your loyal customers, and rewarding them for that. So that's great advice.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. And then also, to add to that, what would be really useful is you're not going to every month create a video campaign with a professional videographer. Maybe that's once or twice a year. But you still hold these events, maybe quarterly or monthly, like you said, and you bring in someone that's the social media, photographer, videographer that comes in and then gets shots during those events. So it's, you utilize that time, and then you can include the beauty of it that I see is the most compelling videos are the ones that show the customers, the diners enjoying the food.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you just hit it on the nail on the head, because it's difficult for a multitude of reasons to get that kind of video when you're in the restaurant
Mhm.
during hours of operation. It's just hard to get them. You have to get people to sign a waiver to show them. And a lot of them aren't interested in being on video. But giving them a free meal and then getting them to sign that waiver up front, you can capture those awesome shots where people just look like they're enjoying their meal, they're eating your food. And I agree with you. There's nothing more impactful than when you see someone take a bite and then their expression says, "Oh my gosh, this is so delicious." It pays dividends, right?
Correct. Yeah. And the restaurant, if they wanted to feature certain foods, they can say, look, this is what we're serving this on this event. But if you wanted to buy alcohol or buy some other dish, we'll prepare that other dish for you. But the beauty is then whoever the videographer is, he's focusing on the product that they really are working on trying to sell and promote. And it can all be done at one. I mean, it just simplifies the whole process.
It's a fantastic way to get around how do you get those really good engagement shots with your restaurant and food and your staff.
Yeah.
I think those kind of events are also a great time for the owner to walk around and talk to those loyal customers, for your staff to interact with them, and then you still get those shots.
Yeah.
If you're going to do an event like that and you take the time to plan that and do that, I would also have your videographer as well as your photographer there. So you were getting a slew of great content that you can leverage in the future. So awesome advice. Awesome advice. Is there anything else that you want to kind of hit regarding restaurant videography before we kind of come to an end? Just when it comes to thinking about the planning or staging or actual execution of videoing or editing, is there anything that we've kind of missed that you want to hit?
I can't understate planning ahead. I really think that's the most important thing. And that's all, and a lot of that falls onto the videographer's shoulders too, to understand the treatment and to plan ahead. Probably one of the most difficult things is thinking ahead about how to transition from shot to shot. And when you're running gun, it's really difficult. So, as much preparation ahead of time or creating how you shoot those things, how you make those shots and creating some latitude. In other words, what I'm saying is you want to create easy transitions in the edit. So you have to think ahead. When I'm shooting one thing one way, I don't just shoot it one way, I shoot it multiple ways. So I'll repeat shots and do it a different way each time so that I have some latitude to make a change in how I transition from one shot to the next.
And I know that, in our planning, we'll do a lot of research. So I think it's a good idea to make sure that you're staying on top of what other restaurateurs are doing, what influencers are doing online, what is trending and people like to see. I think the reason I say that is not that you want to be a copycat, but I do think you can get great ideas of transitioning from one thing to the next. So Michael's really good at this. And there's been times where he'll be like, hey, I want to get a shot of movement, and then it goes into the table, and then it goes from the table to something else. And having that transition, it makes it so smooth, so interesting, and often quite surprising. And it has to be planned out ahead of time, or you would never shoot it that way. It just wouldn't happen. So that upfront work, I think you hit it when you said, do your homework up front, try to map out the shots you want to get, what those little clips or videos will look like. And then when working with a professional, know what you want them to deliver, right? I mean, I think you probably have had many a times where people are just like, okay, you're here, go ahead and shoot. You're like, no, that's not going to work out. So what do you want when somebody contacts you or hires you? What are the things that you ideally would get from a restaurateur to really do the best kind of work you can do?
Well, I think it's important to meet face to face on location and really just have a good discussion about what it is that they want, and then try to articulate as clearly as possible how we can deliver that. And so it's important to be able to throw out ideas. If you have benchmark videos, especially if it's the restaurateur, they have benchmark videos that they're like, I like this. I want something in this style. That's always helpful to the videographer. And it's important for the videographer to kind of gives the same kind of feedback and say, okay, this is what I've been able to do. And here's some other ideas. I haven't done this maybe for a client yet, but here's an idea, a concept that I've come up with. And because as videographers, we don't just do client work. We a lot of times will do what we call a spec ad, where we've created something just for fun, for the experience. And we like the idea. And if it works, that's something we'll take to a restaurateur and say, hey, what do you think of trying something like this?
Yeah, and I know we've done some of those and on some of our shoots, and they sometimes produce something really unique and incredibly compelling and engaging. So I would encourage restaurateurs to stay open minded when it comes to who they're working with. And that's why you also hire someone who has experience and a real passion for creative sort of exploration and bringing something unique to what you are saying. All right, great. Well, Mike, you're awesome. I always love talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
I want to give everyone, so Mike is here in Houston. I know that you travel for bigger jobs. Like I know we've had you travel for some of our jobs, and I know you do for others. Mm-hmm. So don't think if you're not in Houston, that might not still be a good option for capturing really great video for you and your restaurant. So with that, Mike, can you give a little bit of information about if somebody did want to reach you, how they would?
Contact me through my website. That's probably the easiest way. That is crusadermedia.net. And you can find me on Facebook as well at Crusader Media, or just look me up by name. I guess that's about it. That's probably the best way to find me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for participating on this. I think that this will be so helpful for a lot of restaurateurs. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Everyone, if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe so that you can be in the know and hear the next episode, which we continue to try to bring on great people who can help you achieve success in your restaurant. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin.